the coming days about what they're describing as a transition.
Yeah, so that was confirmed earlier that these talks are ongoing. At the same time, cabinet committees were held today and glowing pictures of President Jacob Zuma and Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa inside those doors were released. And it looked like there was no problem if you looked at those pictures.
Yeah.
But we know that behind the scenes, ongoing discussions, and South Africa is still in limbo to some extent.
And there's word that there's a facilitator or someone that's going to help with the conversation?
Ace Magashula, the Secretary General, and now he is seen to be close to President Jacob Zuma, maybe there to represent his interests, which it lends support to the evidence that there could be some deal struck, and we'll have to wait.
And of course, the nature of the deal is what people are going to be wondering what it is that could be being discussed. The African National Congress has to make sure, of course, that this party stays intact post President Zuma's exit. But I think there's a growing acceptance that the country is almost waiting for this event to happen so that there's clarity and that there's certainty about who's in charge of the country, and that the promises that Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa made in places like Davos and the international community can start to play out. And unfortunately for President Zuma, I think people are saying we'll only move once you move.
Yeah, all that positivity, business confidence coming through, and we're seeing it in the rand since Cyril Ramaphosa was elected ANC president. And the narrative, like you say, globally, in a lot of the press has changed. South Africa looking at things like corruption, but that was on the basis that there would be a smooth transition, and that's what we are waiting to hear news of after the cancellation, remember, of the National Executive Committee meeting that was meant to be held tonight, after the cancellation of the State of the Nation address that was meant to be held tomorrow. Two events, President Zuma is scheduled to appear at an Ubuntu event on Saturday, Ramaphosa to appear at another event on Sunday, so maybe this will be deferred till early next week.
So earlier this afternoon, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa issuing a statement saying that I understand and recognize that there might be some anxiousness in society at this time, but that there was going to be these discussions, there was going to be this transition, and that it needed to be handled carefully. And this is something that's been a part of his rhetoric for quite a while now, this dignified exit. And we mustn't forget that the National Elective Conference, of course, that President of the party, Cyril Ramaphosa, won by a very small margin, so that you can almost say that the ANC is half and half if we talk about these factions in the party, and that moving forward they've got to find a way that pleases everybody.
It's understood that President Zuma is saying, on what basis will I leave as well, and the delays, some analysts suggesting, could suggest that this transition, this exit of the president is perhaps more complicated than Cyril Ramaphosa's camp first thought. Just some more statements from what he said earlier. On the basis of the progress made, it was agreed to postpone that meeting, the NEC that's scheduled. This will enable President Zuma and myself to conclude our discussion and report back to the organization and the country in coming days. So we're waiting for that report back.
Well, one of our senior reporters is Mzwambeja, and he's been following the president for many, many years now. And of course, he's in Cape Town, and he went down there thinking that he'll be covering the SONA tomorrow, but that didn't happen. But lots of news has been unfolding. So, Mzwai, another busy day in Cape Town. The Deputy President has been saying that the running of the country continues. These committees have been taking place, and we can actually see the President now getting into his car. As we see this image, have you got any idea of what's been going on inside that office?
This was, in inverted commas, a business as usual meeting where they were meeting cabinet committees and of course he's leaving now, and he is putting on a smile, but of course we know that it's a matter of days before they finalize the issue of his exit, like that statement of the Deputy President of the country, Cyril Ramaphosa, indicated. And of course, this is a very significant development in our country, Peter, because it's never happened this way in terms of the current deputy who then emerges to be the president of the country, of the ANC, and effectively now is in charge, as you can see the convoy leaving.
We've got some visuals, some technical difficulties, but when we check in, we see that convoy leaving and the president leaving that parliamentary precinct a short while ago. Mzwai, is there a growing sense, especially after it was Cyril Ramaphosa releasing the statement today, somewhat presidential, saying, I'm dealing with this, please be calm, you'll get some resolution, that President Jacob Zuma will go?
Indeed, the sense that we are getting is that the president of the ANC or the deputy president of the country is trying to assure everyone that despite the speculation and anxiety that people have been talking about, the country is still running normally, and he will make sure, together with President Jacob Zuma, make sure that there is no unintended consequences as they deal with this issue of transition of power. Because you saw that statement earlier, Francis, that they made it clear that the issues of transition are being spoken about, particularly the position of the president. So, which basically means within the next coming days, we will hear the big announcement regarding the future of President Jacob Zuma.
All right, Mzwai, I guess a lot of people are interested to know. We know that Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is the head of government business. Is he running the country as we speak?
Well, at the moment, Peter, the executive authority still rests with President Jacob Zuma because he is the head of state. But of course, we know that Deputy President he's really been running a lot of entities because he's the leader of government business and, of course, the newly elected ANC president. We know, Peter, that if you are the president of the ANC, basically you are the center of power. So as much as President Zuma is a deployee of the ANC in government, he derives his power from the ANC, and currently the head of the ANC is Cyril Ramaphosa. So you can say that yes, as much as President Zuma still has executive authority, but Deputy President is really running the show. You can go back to issues of ESCOM, that board which was appointed in the past few weeks to try and turn around the situation there. So those illustrate that he's effectively getting in charge. But as you know, constitutionally, the president is still President Jacob Zuma.
Mzwai, what about the reports that the Secretary General, Ace Magashule, is now part of those discussions? He's been seen as being close to President Zuma. Will he be there? Does that point to the understanding that there will be some sort of deal, and will he be there representing the President Zuma's interests?
Francis, we spoke to the Secretary General of the ANC last night. Remember, we were expecting today to cover the special NEC, but then at around about 9, so then we got a call from the ANC that the Secretary General needed to convey the message that the special NEC had been postponed. So when we spoke to him, he basically said those discussions were very, very fruitful between President Zuma and Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. And then we said, we then followed it up with the question to say, is he hopeful? I mean, were they the only ones in the room? And then he said he actually had the opportunity to be in the room when these two individuals were discussing the issue of transition. And then you can see that they have decided, I think, as the ANC, to really put a united face, a united front in handling this issue, because they do recognize that he may have supported a different candidate to President Ramaphosa going to the conference, but now they have to accept that President Ramaphosa is the president of the ANC, so they need to support him 100%. I think it's in that context, Francis, that they have decided to say, let the interest of the country be put forward, because if they continue the bickering and the divisions, so that will take the country really back. So the Secretary General was basically saying he wants to put the interests of the country ahead of everything. And then he was happy to see these two gentlemen really put the interests of the country forward.
Zuma, you talk about putting the country first. And, you know, a lot of people, because they're kind of watching from the outside looking in, you've spent a lot of time with President Zuma over the years, and as people speculate that all of this negotiations and deal-making is all about saving himself or getting a position for himself, Jesse Duarte dropped a hint yesterday that, you know, a lot of people misread the president, and that maybe actually he is very concerned about the party and he is very concerned about the country, and this is why that he might be taking his time, that it isn't just about himself, but he genuinely does have concern about the party and the things around him. Is that a possibility?
Peter, having spoken to him a number of times, perhaps one of the most recent interviews that we did was before the December conference that elected the current leadership. So we did pose the question as to if the leadership wanted him to exit, would he do that? And then part of the answer he gave was that if his stepping aside would not divide the party or would not bring negative consequences to the party and the country, so he would do that. But all he wanted is that a procedure must be followed, and of course I think that's what the ANC has been engaged in, because the ANC has decided that it wants a new start with the new leadership. So he's been saying if the party, and I know that at some point some of his statements have been viewed as contradictory, but I mean, even the statement, I think he was in KZN, I think on the 12th of April 2017, where he basically said, if the leadership comes and says, well, Mr. President, thank you very much, so we want you to step aside now. He said he was going to do that. So some of the things that he's been trying to do, he's been trying to ensure that perhaps the party doesn't get affected negatively and the country doesn't really suffer these consequences. And you remember, Peter, one of the lessons they have learned is the manner in which they dealt with former President Thabo Mbeki. And then time and again they're saying, so it means they would not have learned if they would repeat exactly the same mistake. Yes, they did decide to recall President Mbeki, perhaps in a very clumsy way. So if this thing happens now to the current president, they ought to have learned to say, well, if they decide to recall him, but they must do it in a way that will not polarize anyone. Because remember, Peter, he still has massive support across the country. And I think the ANC, having decided that they want unity and renewal, they wouldn't want to polarize that kind of support.
Thank you very much, Mzwa Mbeje, outside the parliamentary precinct where we saw President Jacob Zuma leaving a short while ago with a smile on his face. But we do know that these transition discussions are underway behind the scenes, and that's confirmed by the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa, saying to the country that is anxious and I think feeling that maybe this is clumsy, that there have been so many delays that at least we will have resolution in coming days.
All right, you're watching the SABC's Prime News, and we'll be back shortly with more on all of these issues.